Hello, it's Storm Schoonover, and we're just getting ready to begin our final presentation for educational research. Today we're looking at gender and resiliency, identifying strategies to increase resiliency in military-connected adolescents. To start off today, I wanted to start off with these two pictures. Resiliency, it's an important thing, especially for military youth. Which leads us to our introduction. As of 2012, Gardner, Arnold, and Nunnery reported that there were more than 1.2 million children with one or both parents employed as active duty service members of the United States military. This population of students moves on average 6 to 9 times between kindergarten and graduation. While being a military dependent is linked to increased risks in emotional and behavior problems and increased high-risk behaviors, most military children have a high rate of emotional resiliency. Increased resiliency helps military children to adapt during times of high stress, particularly parental deployment and moving. Which leads us to our literature review. First, we'll look at deployment as a military stressor. Military affiliation for children increases the probability of mental health problems, especially depression and anxiety. Bobbering and Hornback expand. Overall, outpatient mental health visits of children with deployed parents have increased significantly, doubling from 1 million to 2 million between 2003 and 2008. The dramatic increase in mental health visits implies that military deployments, which began in 2001, have a significant impact on military youth. The length of deployment also has direct consequences for youth. Children whose parents were deployed more than 11 months have the highest levels of mental health diagnoses. Children are at a higher risk of neglect from their caregivers or their caregiving parent during deployment. The combination of lengthy deployments and increased likelihood of parental neglect directly impacts the mental health of military youth. Military children with a deployed parent are twice as likely to use illegal or prescription drugs as similar non-military children. This population is also more likely to consume alcohol and to be considered at risk for alcohol and drug abuse, especially during times of high familial stress. Johnson and Ling report that risky behavior increases as much as 75% when mom is deployed, and sexual activity in teen pregnancy increases when dad is deployed. Female adolescents with deployed parents are more likely to binge drink, whereas adolescent boys were more likely to consider suicide and suffer from depression. The degree of stress associated with deployment and reintegration is dependent on the relationship strengths and weaknesses in the family and the overall mental health of each family member. In order to promote overall wellness, psychological resilience and decreased deployment-related stress needs to be a top priority for public health officials or public health professionals. Academic achievement can also suffer as a result of parental deployment. Bobbering and Hornback looked at teacher and counselor input. Teachers and counselors pointed to low parental engagement, parental mental health problems, students' increased household responsibility, and stress and anxiety related to deployment as factors affecting students' ability to function well in school. Another military-related stressor is frequent transitions. Military children on average attend 5 different school districts before graduation. Johnson and Lee determined that frequent school transitions enhance resiliency. Additionally, communities with a strong military culture ease the transition for many military youth. Military children are more likely to experience educational gaps because of the frequent transition. Differences in state curriculum standards and graduation requirements also exacerbate educational gaps. Uniform curriculum, like that utilized in DODEA schools, help to decrease academic gaps for military children who move between schools, but that only applies to children who remain in the DODEA system. Resiliency among military adolescents. Research has found that military children, though faced with additional stressors, are more resilient than their non-military peers. This is attributed to many factors. Often military-connected youth have previous exposure to different cultures and environments and are more likely to adapt to their new environment following a military transfer. Children are more resilient during times of stress and transitions when supported by a military community and by others in the military life. Community support and positive military perceptions also increase resiliency for military family members, which leads us to academic resiliency. The military lifestyle impacts student academic resiliency. Bobberine and Hornback found that children whose parents have been deployed 19 months or longer since 2001 have lower achievement test scores compared to those who have experienced less or no parental deployment. Educational support can increase resiliency. The Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children encourages more streamlined process for credit, placement, record transfers for military children to enhance academic success and on-time graduation rates. Schools that focus on sharing best practices to support military children can also encourage military resilient youth. Schools can encourage service members to join students at school and broadcast graduation and special events over the internet. Programs that include optional extracurricular groups that focus on resilience and building peer relationships can also support resiliency. Gender and resiliency. Although research on gender and resiliency is minimal, evidence suggests that the connection is apparent in outdoor adventure programs and can perhaps provide insight regarding military children. Overholt and Ewart found that women experience risk differently than men. They found that males had a higher self-perception of resilience before beginning an adventure program, whereas females had lower self-perceived levels of resilience, and men who shared emotions and communicated effectively were shown to have higher resiliency. However, females had high perceived levels of resilience after completing the adventure, while male resilience scores decreased. Overholt and Ewart concluded that females and males experience and develop resiliency differently, and second, that the mechanisms of an adventure-based program that facilitates the effect may be different for women and men. Milburn and Lightfoot identified additional gender differences at school. School staff reported that boys exhibit anger and aggression, while girls had somatic complaints and seemed depressed during parental deployment. Which leads us to research gaps. With regard to these findings, research on gender-specific military resiliency and military-connected adolescents is needed to understand what interventions can increase emotional and academic well-being. Research has previously looked at resiliency in military families. Gender-based analysis has not been completed. Researchers have not identified gender-specific methods for increasing resiliency among military-connected adolescents. Milburn and Lightfoot further identify a need for adolescent-specific research. While Williams and Bryan identified certain home factors and school factors that improved academic resiliency among urban African-American male adolescents, there is a gap in information concerning resiliency factors for military adolescents. High resiliency among military-connected youth is important in decreasing high-risk behavior, increasing behavior problems, and increasing emotional health. The guiding research questions for this study are: how does student relationship to caregiver affect resiliency for military adolescent males and females? How do contextual factors affect resiliency for adolescent military-connected males and females? How does adolescent age and gender influence levels of resiliency for military-connected youth? And how does gender and age influence strategy use to improve resiliency for military-connected youth when exposed to military-related stressors? The purpose of this mixed method study is to identify how gender and age affect military-connected youth resiliency, identify skills and techniques used by highly resilient military youth, and examine how skills and techniques that are used by highly resilient military youth vary based on gender and age. The results of this study will allow researchers to understand how gender and age of military-connected youth influence resiliency and skill development, especially when exposed to military-related stressors like deployment and frequent transition. The participants for this study will be limited to students enrolled at domestic-dependent elementary and secondary schools in grades 6 through 12 at Fort Campbell, in the Fort Campbell, Kentucky School District. It is limited to grades 6 through 12 to ensure the data is collected on adolescent age children. There are 2 middle schools with a total enrollment of approximately 930 students in grades 6 through 8 on Fort Campbell. Fort Campbell High School has an approximate enrollment of 850 students in grades 9 through 12. Total, there are 1,780 students are enrolled in the ODS schools on the Fort Campbell military installation in grades 6 through 12. The mixed methods embedded study will have 2 phases. Phase 1 is a resilience survey, and phase 2 is focus group interviews. For phase 1, the students will be identified through stratified sampling. To determine the sample, students will be divided into gender groups by grade level. 32 male students and 32 female students will be surveyed for each grade level, or 20% of the total population. These students will be randomly chosen through random selection after being separated by gender and grade level. Total, 224 female students and 224 male students will be administered the survey. 14% of males and 14% of females per grade level will be administered the survey to get a proportional random sample of military, adolescent, female, and male students. Stratified random sampling data collection will occur in order to get a precise, clear sample to illustrate the levels of resiliency for military-connected adolescents compared to military-connected adolescent females, or males compared to military-connected adolescent females by grade level. The information will be used to develop focus groups for phase 2 of the survey in order to answer additional research questions. The second phase of the study will begin after the students have been given the initial survey on resiliency to target the focus group participants. Sample will be determined using purposive sampling. Based on survey results, highly resilient male and female students will be identifiable. Every student in this identified group will be invited to attend focus group interviews. 4 focus groups will be created. The first will be comprised of highly resilient males in grades 6 through 8. The second will be comprised of highly resilient females in grades 6 through 8. The third group will be comprised of highly resilient males in grades 9 through 12. The final group will be comprised of highly resilient females in grades 9 through 12. Military-specific questions will be used, as well as catalyst questions included with the phase 1 survey administration packet. Military-specific questions will include: how does moving with the military affect you personally and academically? What strategies do you use to make moving easier? What advice do you give a new peer, or a peer new to the military lifestyle? Have you had a parent deploy? How does your parent's deployment affect you personally? How does your life change when your parent deploys? What things do you do while your parent is deployed to help you with these changes? What does it mean to be a military dependent? Instrumentation for phase 1 we will be using the Child and Youth Resilience Measure, which was developed by the Resilience Research Center. It's a 5-point Likert scale survey with 28 questions divided into 3 subgroups: individual traits, relationship to caregiver, and contextual factors. The CYRM was assessed using Cronbach's alpha, paired sample t-test, and interclass correlation coefficient to check for validity. It will take approximately 20 minutes to complete the survey. For phase 2, participants will be selected using high mean scores in all 3 subgroups from phase 1. Each focus group will be asked the same questions and transcribed for later analysis. It will take place in a neutral school environment using Resilience Research Center catalyst questions and military stressor-specific questions that we covered previously. This is what the CYRM survey looks like. It has 28 questions. Again, you see the Likert scale at the top. For data analysis, data will be analyzed using the standard deviation of the data collected from the CY, or for phase 1, data will be analyzed using the standard deviation of the data collected from the CYRM 28 research tool for each subgroup of the test. A NOVA test for variance will be used. The independent variables will be our individual traits, relationship to caregiver, and contextual factors as gathered from the research tool. The dependent variables we'll be looking at are age and gender. Using this analysis, the following questions will be answered, or will be addressed. How does adolescent age and gender relate to level of resiliency for military connected youth? How do contextual factors affect resiliency for military adolescent females and males? How does relationship to caregiver affect resiliency for military adolescent females and males? Individuals who have a high resilience score on each section of the CYRM 28 will be invited to participate in the second phase of the study, answering the question, how does gender influence strategy used to improve resiliency for military-connected youth when exposed to military stressors? Interview responses will be recorded and transcribed. The research, or for phase 2, interview responses will be recorded and transcribed. The researcher will use qualitative content analysis to analyze the transcribed interviews. The researcher will use a coding frame to condense and group the content of the interviews. This frame will be developed after analysis of phase 1 data. The researcher will read the transcript, organize the information into categories. From these categories, patterns and themes will be identified and described in order to identify gender-specific factors and skills used by military-connected adolescents to support high resiliency. The researcher will specifically analyze the data looking for coping strategies, strengths, and involvement in extracurricular activities specific to gender and adolescent age. The researcher will use member checking to validate results and limit researcher bias. Focus group participants will be able to evaluate the researcher transcripts prior to analysis. The participants will be asked to sign off on the transcript, attesting to accuracy of reporting. This ensures that the researcher does not inadvertently bias the data. Which leads us to our references. Thank you very much, and have a great summer.